One night with a billionaire, and the next day she was in the interview room. The alarm clock screaming at 5:30 a.m. had become Olivia Bennett's enemy, but today she hit snooze 3 times anyway. Her studio apartment in Brooklyn felt smaller each morning, especially when the stack of bills on her kitchen counter seemed to multiply overnight. The rent notice, $2,400 due in 5 days, stared back at her like a personal insult. 28 years old, 2 jobs, and still counting quarters for the subway. This wasn't exactly the New York dream she'd imagined. The coffee maker gurgled to life as she pulled on her uniform for the morning shift at Brew and Bean, the cozy cafe where she spent her days crafting lattes for people who probably made her monthly salary in a week. Her hands moved mechanically through the routine: shower, hair in a messy bun, concealer under her eyes to hide the exhaustion that had become her permanent companion. Another glamorous day in paradise, she muttered to her reflection, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The morning rush at Brew and Bean was relentless. Steam hissed, espresso machines chattered, and customers rushed past in their tailored suits and designer heels. Olivia watched them through the window, wondering what it felt like to walk with such confidence, such purpose. "Olivia, table 6 needs their order," called Marco, the cafe owner who treated her more like family than an employee. She grabbed the tray, balancing 3 lattes and a blueberry scone, when her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Camilla. "Girl, you've been working yourself to death. Come out with me tonight. There's this amazing bar at the Meridian Hotel in Manhattan. You need this." Olivia stared at the message, calculating in her head. A night out meant subway fare both ways, drinks she couldn't afford, and probably staying up too late before her office temp job tomorrow. But when was the last time she'd done something just for herself? By 6 p.m., she was standing in front of her tiny closet, holding up the one black dress that still made her feel like the confident woman she used to be. The fabric was soft against her skin, and for a moment she almost felt like she belonged in Manhattan's glittering world. The Meridian Hotel's bar was everything Camilla had promised: soft lighting, jazz music floating through the air, and people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Olivia felt underdressed despite her best efforts, but Camilla grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the bar. "2 Cosmos," Camilla called to the bartender, then turned to Olivia with a grin. "Tonight, we're not thinking about bills, jobs, or anything stressful. Tonight, we're just 2 women enjoying life." The Cosmopolitan tasted like liquid confidence, and by her second sip, Olivia felt her shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. The conversation flowed easily: work gossip, dating disasters, dreams they'd put on hold. It felt good to laugh, really laugh, without calculating what it cost. That's when she noticed him. He was standing near the window, drink in hand, looking out at the city lights. There was something magnetic about the way he carried himself, confident without being arrogant, observant without seeming distant. When he turned and their eyes met across the room, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine attraction. He approached with the kind of easy stride that suggested he belonged everywhere he went. Up close, she could see the subtle details: the expensive watch, the perfectly tailored shirt, the way his dark hair was just slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his fingers through it. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the room," he said, his voice warm and surprisingly humble. "I'm Ethan." "Olivia," she replied, extending her hand. The moment their fingers touched, she felt a spark that had nothing to do with the alcohol. Camilla, reading the situation perfectly, made a graceful exit with a wink and a whispered, "Text me later." What followed was the kind of conversation that made hours feel like minutes. They talked about books, travel dreams, the way the city looked different at night. He was intelligent without being condescending, funny without trying too hard. When he mentioned loving the small cafe atmosphere over corporate coffee chains, she found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. "There's something refreshing about places where people actually know your name," Ethan said, swirling his whiskey, "where the barista remembers how you like your coffee." "I couldn't agree more," Olivia replied, not mentioning that she was one of those baristas. The night took on a dreamlike quality. They moved from the bar to a quieter corner, their conversation becoming more intimate, more personal. He listened when she talked about her love for old movies, and she found herself leaning closer when he described his favorite hidden spots in the city. "I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my life lately," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Going through the motions without really living. I understand that feeling more than you know," he said quietly. "Sometimes it takes meeting someone unexpected to realize you've been holding your breath." The space between them seemed to shrink with each shared glance, each laugh, each moment of comfortable silence. When he suggested they continue the conversation somewhere more private, she didn't hesitate. Walking through the hotel lobby felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. The elevator ride was charged with anticipation, their hands almost touching, the air thick with possibility. His suite overlooked the city, Manhattan sprawling out below them like a glittering promise. But Olivia barely noticed the view. All she could focus on was the way he looked at her, not just with desire, but with something deeper, something that made her feel seen for the first time in months. What happened next was inevitable, beautiful, and intense in a way that surprised them both. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was connection, understanding, the feeling of finding someone who spoke the same language. Afterward, lying in the soft hotel sheets with the city lights casting shadows on the walls, they talked until the early hours of morning. No last names, no details about their real lives, just two people existing in a perfect bubble, away from the world's complications. "I don't usually do this," Olivia said softly, her head on his chest. "Neither do I," he replied, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "But somehow, this feels right." When dawn began to creep through the curtains, reality started to intrude. Olivia knew she had to leave, had to get back to her real life, her 2 jobs, her stack of bills. This had been magical, but magic didn't pay rent. They shared one last kiss by the elevator, both knowing without saying that this was goodbye. Some moments were too perfect to risk ruining with the messiness of real life. "Thank you," she whispered, "for reminding me what it feels like to be alive." "Thank you," he replied, "for being exactly what I didn't know I needed." The elevator doors closed between them, and Olivia rode down to the lobby with her heart racing and her mind already trying to preserve every detail of the night. She walked out into the morning air, her heels clicking on the sidewalk, feeling like Cinderella after midnight. Back to reality, but carrying something precious with her. On the subway ride back to Brooklyn, she stared at her reflection in the dark window and made herself a promise. Tomorrow she would go to that job interview at the tech company. She would try for something better, something that might lead to the kind of life where nights like this weren't just beautiful accidents. She had no idea that fate had already decided their story was far from over. As the train pulled into her station, Olivia Bennett had no way of knowing that in less than 12 hours she would be sitting across from the man who had just changed her world forever, and that he would be holding all the power over her future. She shouldn't have worn the blazer from Zara. It was her only good one, and if she didn't get this job, she'd need it for other interviews. Olivia stood outside the glass tower that housed TechNova Solutions, her resume clutched in a leather portfolio she'd bought 3 years ago when she still believed everything would work out according to plan. The building stretched up into the Manhattan sky like a monument to success, all steel and glass and the kind of confidence that came with 7-figure revenues. Her reflection stared back from the lobby's polished surfaces, professional, composed, completely different from the woman who'd spent the night in a stranger's arms just 18 hours ago. She'd practiced her answers in the mirror, rehearsed her smile, even watched YouTube videos on proper handshake technique. "You've got this," she whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders. "You need this." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt eternal. Each floor that passed brought her closer to a potential new life. Better salary, health insurance, maybe even enough money to move to a 1-bedroom apartment. She tried to push thoughts of last night aside, but traces of him lingered. The scent of expensive cologne on her dress, the memory of his laugh, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Focus, Olivia. This is about your future. The reception area was all minimalist design and quiet efficiency. A woman with perfect hair and a Hermes scarf directed her to a conference room where she was told to wait. Through the glass walls, she could see employees moving with purpose, their MacBooks and designer coffee cups marking them as part of a world she desperately wanted to join. Ms. Bennett, a woman in her 40s, appeared at the door, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Head of Human Resources. Ready for us?" Olivia nodded, following Jennifer down a hallway lined with awards and company achievements. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing her nervousness. This was it, her chance to prove she was more than just a barista with a college degree and crushing debt. The conference room was intimidating in its simplicity. Long glass table, ergonomic chairs, and a view of Manhattan that probably cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. 3 people were already seated, laptops open, water glasses perfectly positioned. "Please have a seat," Jennifer said, gesturing to the chair facing the panel. "Let me introduce our team. This is David Kim, our Chief Technology Officer, and Miranda Torres, Vice President of Operations." Olivia smiled, shook hands, made the right noises. Everything was going according to script until Jennifer continued. "And this is our CEO, Ethan Carter. He likes to be personally involved in key hires." The world tilted. Sitting at the head of the table, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, was the man who had whispered her name in the darkness just hours ago. The man whose hands had traced the curve of her spine, whose voice had made her forget every worry, every bill, every reason to be careful. Ethan Carter. Their eyes met across the polished table, and for a moment that felt like an eternity, time stopped. She watched recognition flicker across his features, surprise, then something deeper, more complicated. His professional mask slipped just long enough for her to see the same shock she was fighting to hide. Instinctively, Olivia raised her leather portfolio, trying to create a barrier between them, her eyes darting anywhere but his face. This couldn't be happening. This was her chance, her interview, her future, and it was all crashing down because she'd made one impulsive decision. But when she finally dared to look back, Ethan's expression had shifted into something that made her pulse quicken. A slow, knowing smile was spreading across his face, private and intimate, despite the room full of people. He remembered everything. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice carrying just enough warmth to make her cheeks flush. "Welcome to TechNova. Please, tell us about yourself." The question that should have been simple felt loaded with subtext. What could she possibly say? That she served coffee to pay her bills, that she lived in a studio apartment with furniture from IKEA, that last night she'd discovered what it felt like to be completely alive in his arms. "I graduated from NYU with a degree in communications," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've been working in customer service and administrative roles while building my professional experience." She kept her eyes on Jennifer and David, refusing to look at Ethan, but she could feel his gaze like a physical touch. Every word felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he could see through her carefully constructed professional persona to the woman who'd laughed in his hotel suite. "What attracts you to TechNova?" Miranda asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. This time, Olivia couldn't avoid glancing at Ethan. "I'm drawn to companies that value innovation and authentic connection with their clients. In my experience, the best business relationships are built on genuine understanding and trust." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes at her words. His fingers drummed once against the table, a gesture she recognized from their conversation over drinks when he'd been thinking through a complicated point. "Tell us about a time you had to navigate a challenging situation," David said, his tone friendly but assessing. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Recently, I found myself in an unexpected situation that required me to quickly adapt and maintain my professionalism despite personal complications. She risked another glance at Ethan. I learned that sometimes the most challenging circumstances can also be the most revealing about your character and what you're truly capable of. Ethan's smile widened almost imperceptibly. He was enjoying this, the double meanings, the careful dance of words that said everything and nothing. "What are your salary expectations?" Jennifer asked, and Olivia felt her confidence waver. The truth was, she'd take almost anything that paid better than her current situation, but she couldn't appear desperate. "I'm looking for a position that reflects both my skills and growth potential. I believe the right fit is about more than just compensation. It's about finding a place where I can contribute meaningfully." "And if you discovered that a professional relationship had unexpected personal dimensions?" Ethan asked quietly, his first direct question. "How would you handle maintaining appropriate boundaries?" The room felt charged with tension that only the two of them could understand. Olivia met his gaze directly for the first time since sitting down. "I believe that professional integrity should always be the priority," she said carefully. "But I also think that genuine human connections, when handled with maturity and discretion, don't have to compromise professional excellence. Sometimes they can even enhance it." The silence that followed felt loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. Jennifer cleared her throat. "Well, I think we have enough to move forward. We'll be making our decision within the next few days." As the others gathered their materials and made polite closing remarks, Ethan remained seated, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. When the room finally emptied except for the two of them, the air crackled with everything they couldn't say. "Olivia," he said softly, her name carrying the weight of shared memory. "Mr. Carter," she replied, standing quickly and clutching her portfolio like armor. "I hope we'll have the chance to work together," he said, his voice professional, but his eyes anything but. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and walked toward the door with as much dignity as she could muster. But just as she reached the threshold, his voice stopped her. "Olivia." She turned back, and for just a moment he wasn't the CEO of a tech company. He was just the man who'd held her until dawn. Some opportunities are worth taking risks for. She stepped into the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs, knowing that everything had just changed and that there was no going back now. The phone call came on a rainy Thursday morning while Olivia was counting tips from the coffee shop, her fingers sticky with anxiety and hope. "Miss Bennett, this is Jennifer Walsh from TechNova. I'm pleased to offer you the position of administrative coordinator. Can you start Monday?" Olivia pressed the phone against her ear, hardly believing the words. 55,000 a year, health insurance, 2 weeks paid vacation. It wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. "Yes," she breathed, clutching the counter for support. "Absolutely yes." What Jennifer didn't mention, what couldn't be said over a professional phone call, was that Ethan Carter had personally requested she be placed on the executive floor. Olivia wouldn't know this until later, wouldn't understand that every decision about her placement had been carefully orchestrated by the man who couldn't stop thinking about her laugh. Monday morning arrived too quickly, and not quickly enough. Olivia stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., applying concealer under her eyes and trying to calm the storm in her chest. She'd spent the weekend buying work clothes she couldn't afford, 2 blazers, 3 blouses, and a pair of heels that would probably give her blisters, but made her feel like she belonged in Manhattan's business world. The TechNova building looked different when you weren't just visiting for an interview. Now it was her building, her workplace, her chance at something better. The security guard smiled and handed her a temporary badge with her photo, proof that she was really here, really starting over. "Olivia Bennett, 32nd floor," she told the elevator operator, and the words felt like magic. Jennifer met her in the lobby of the executive floor, armed with a folder full of paperwork and a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "Ready for your first day? I think you're going to love it here." The tour was overwhelming in the best way. State-of-the-art technology, a break room with a coffee machine that probably cost more than her old monthly salary, and windows everywhere offering glimpses of the city she was finally becoming part of. "Your desk is here," Jennifer said, stopping beside a sleek workstation, positioned strategically between the elevator and the conference rooms. "You'll be supporting our executive team with scheduling, communications, and special projects." Olivia ran her fingers along the clean surface of her new desk, trying to absorb the reality. She had her own computer, her own phone extension, her own small piece of this impressive world. "Now, let me introduce you to the team you'll be working with most closely." The morning passed in a blur of names and faces. David Kim, the CTO, shook her hand and welcomed her warmly. Miranda Torres gave her a knowing smile and mentioned they'd probably work together on client presentations. The other administrative staff were friendly, offering tips about the best lunch spots and where to find supplies. But Ethan was conspicuously absent from these introductions. It wasn't until after lunch, when Olivia was finally settling into her workspace and trying to memorize the company directory, that she heard his voice. "Ms. Bennett." She looked up to find him standing beside her desk, and for a moment, her professionalism wavered. He was wearing a different suit, charcoal grey this time, but he still had that same magnetic presence that had drawn her across a hotel bar. The same eyes that had memorized every detail of her face in the dim light of his suite. "Mr. Carter," she managed, standing quickly and smoothing her skirt. "I wanted to personally welcome you to the team," he said, his voice carefully neutral despite the way his gaze lingered on her face. "I hope your first day is going well." "Very well, thank you." She was proud of how steady her voice sounded, how professional she appeared, despite the way her pulse was racing. "Excellent. I'd like to schedule some time later this week to discuss your role in more detail. There are several projects I think you'd be perfect for." The word perfect carried just enough emphasis to remind her of other things he'd called her perfect for, in a different context, in a different lifetime that was actually just 5 days ago. "Of course, I'll check your calendar and coordinate with your assistant." "Actually," Ethan said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply, "you'll be working directly with me on these projects. I prefer a more hands-on approach." Before she could respond, David Kim appeared at her desk with a stack of files and a friendly smile. "Olivia, when you have a moment, could you help me organize these client portfolios? We've got a presentation tomorrow, and I'm drowning in paperwork." "I'll be right there," she said, grateful for the interruption. Ethan nodded politely to David, his CEO mask sliding perfectly into place. "David, good to see you. I was just welcoming our newest team member." "Great hire," David said enthusiastically. "I can already tell she's going to be a huge asset." "I'm counting on it," Ethan replied, his eyes finding Olivia's one more time before he walked away. The rest of the afternoon passed in a whirlwind of learning new systems, organizing files, and trying to prove that she belonged here. But every time Ethan walked past her desk, which seemed to happen more often than coincidence would suggest, the air felt charged with electricity. Around 4 p.m., her computer chimed with a new email from ecarter@technova.com. Subject, project discussion. "Ms. Bennett, please schedule a meeting for tomorrow at 5 p.m. to discuss the Morrison account presentation. We'll need privacy to review sensitive client information. E. Carter." Olivia stared at the screen, reading between the lines. A meeting at 5 p.m. when most of the office would be empty. Privacy to discuss sensitive information. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed her response. "Mr. Carter, meeting scheduled for tomorrow, 5 p.m. in conference room C. I'll prepare the necessary materials. Best regards, Olivia Bennett." The reply came back within minutes. "Perfect. Looking forward to our collaboration." As 6 p.m. approached and the office began to empty, Olivia gathered her things with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She'd survived her first day, proven she could handle the work, maintained her professionalism despite the impossible situation. But as she waited for the elevator, she caught sight of Ethan through his office window. He was standing with his back to the door, looking out at the city, and something about his posture suggested he was thinking about more than quarterly reports. The elevator doors opened, and just as she stepped inside, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You were perfect today." As she stared at the message, her heart hammering as the elevator descended toward the lobby. How had he gotten her number? When had he saved it in his phone? And why did such a simple text make her feel like she was falling all over again? As the doors opened to the marble lobby, Olivia realized she was walking into uncharted territory. The rules were different now. They were colleagues, professional associates bound by contracts and corporate policies. But tomorrow at 5 p.m., they would be alone in a conference room, and all the chemistry that had brought them together in that hotel bar would still be there, simmering beneath the surface of spreadsheets and client presentations. Some games were more dangerous when played in the daylight. By 4:55 p.m., the 32nd floor had transformed into a ghost town of empty desks and abandoned coffee cups. Olivia sat at her workstation, pretending to review the Morrison account files while her heart performed gymnastics in her chest. She'd changed her blouse twice during lunch, settled on the navy one that brought out her eyes, then immediately regretted the choice. This was supposed to be a professional meeting about client presentations, not whatever her racing pulse was preparing for. The elevator dinged as the last group of employees headed home, their laughter echoing down the hallway before fading into silence. Now it was just her, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the weight of anticipation that felt thick enough to touch. At exactly 5 p.m., she gathered the Morrison files and walked toward conference room C, her heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. Through the glass walls, she could see Manhattan's skyline beginning its transformation from business gray to evening gold. Ethan was already inside, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than CEO for the first time since that night at the hotel. He was studying documents spread across the conference table, but when she knocked softly on the glass door, his head lifted immediately. "Come in," he said. And even those two words carried more intimacy than any professional meeting should allow. Olivia entered, closing the door behind her with a soft click that seemed to seal them into their own private world. "I have the Morrison files you requested, along with the preliminary presentation outline from David's team." "Thank you." Ethan gestured to the chair beside him rather than across the table. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." She settled into the chair, acutely aware of how close they were, how the conference room's glass walls made them visible to anyone who might return to the office, but also created an illusion of intimacy against the backdrop of the empty floor. "The Morrison account is important," Ethan began, his voice steady and professional. "They're considering a significant technology upgrade, and if we land this contract, it could mean expansion for several departments." Olivia nodded, opening her portfolio and trying to focus on the numbers and projections he was showing her, but it was impossible to concentrate when she could smell his cologne, different from that night, more subtle, but still distinctly him. "The presentation needs to demonstrate not just our technical capabilities, but our understanding of their specific needs," he continued, leaning closer to point out details on the spreadsheet. Their hands brushed as she reached for her pen, and the contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. Both of them froze for a moment, the professional pretense wavering. "Ethan," she said quietly, then caught herself. "I mean, Mr. Carter, I need to ask, did you hire me because of my qualifications, or because of that night?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Both. Your qualifications are exactly what we need for this position. But I won't lie and say our connection didn't influence my decision." The honesty was both refreshing and terrifying. "I need this job," she said carefully. "I can't afford for there to be any questions about my professionalism or my capabilities." "There won't be," he said firmly. "You earned this position, Olivia. What happened between us? That exists separately from your work here." "Does it?" she challenged. "Because sitting in this conference room with you right now doesn't feel separate. It feels like we're pretending to discuss client presentations while both thinking about how your hands felt against my skin. The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and true. Ethan's professional mask slipped completely, revealing the man who had whispered her name in the darkness. "What do you want me to say?" he asked quietly. "That I haven't thought about that night every day since. That I didn't specifically request you be placed on this floor so I could see you. That I didn't schedule this meeting as an excuse to be alone with you." Olivia's breath caught. "That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say. Because you haven't thought about it too." She looked down at the Morrison files, at the neat columns of numbers that represented real business, real money, real consequences if she made the wrong choice. "That's not the point. I can't be the woman who sleeps her way into a better position." "You're not," Ethan said, his voice urgent. "Your work today was flawless. David specifically mentioned how impressed he was with your organizational skills. Miranda asked if you'd be available to help with the Johnson proposal next week. You belong here, Olivia. Not because of that night, but because you're good at what you do." She wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in like fog. "What happens when people start noticing the way you look at me? When they see us in meetings together and start whispering?" "Then we'll handle it professionally," he said. "We'll maintain appropriate boundaries during business hours." "And after business hours?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Ethan reached across the table, his fingers just barely brushing hers. "After business hours, we're two adults who can make our own choices about our personal lives." A sound in the hallway made them both jump apart. Footsteps approached the conference room, and through the glass walls they watched as the night cleaning crew began their rounds. The spell was broken, reality intruding on their private moment. "We should focus on the presentation," Olivia said, her voice shaky. "Of course." Ethan's professional demeanor snapped back into place with impressive speed. "The Morrison team values innovation, but also reliability. Our proposal needs to balance cutting-edge solutions with proven results." For the next hour, they worked through the presentation details with focused professionalism. Olivia took notes, suggested modifications, offered insights that impressed him with their strategic thinking. By the time they finished, the sun had set completely, painting Manhattan in neon and shadow. "This is excellent work," Ethan said, gathering the documents. "I think we have a strong foundation for Thursday's presentation." "Thank you," Olivia replied, standing and smoothing her skirt. "I'll have the revised slides ready by tomorrow afternoon." They walked toward the conference room door together, the evening's tension still humming between them, despite their return to professional topics. Ethan reached for the handle first, his hand covering hers for just a moment as she reached for it at the same time. "Olivia," he said softly, and she looked up to find his face inches from hers. "I know this is complicated. I know it's risky. But I need you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with business and everything to do with the way you made me feel like myself again." Before she could respond, he stepped back, opening the door and gesturing for her to exit first. The moment of intimacy dissolved as they returned to the empty office space, but his words echoed in her mind. "Good night, Miss Bennett," he said formally as they reached the elevator bank. "Good night, Mr. Carter," she replied, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed between them, Olivia caught her reflection in the polished metal and realized she was smiling. It was dangerous, complicated, and potentially career-ending, but for the first time in months, she felt truly alive. Her phone buzzed with a text as the elevator descended toward the lobby. "The presentation will be perfect. Just like everything else about working with you. Sweet dreams." Some rules, Olivia thought as she walked out into the Manhattan night, were meant to be carefully, quietly broken. The coffee appeared on Olivia's desk at exactly 9:15 a.m., steam rising from the white cup like a question mark against the morning light. She stared at it for a full minute before touching the ceramic. Medium roast, 1 sugar, splash of cream, exactly how she'd ordered it during their first conversation at the hotel bar. There was no note, no obvious indication of who had left it, but the precision of the order made her pulse quicken. "Lucky you," said a voice behind her. Olivia turned to find Cassandra Wells, one of the senior administrative assistants, eyeing the coffee with barely concealed curiosity. "Someone's already figured out your preferences." Yes, I guess so," Olivia managed, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. Cassandra was the kind of woman who seemed to know everything about everyone. 30-something, perfectly styled auburn hair, and an expression that suggested she collected office gossip like some people collected vintage wine. She perched on the edge of Olivia's desk with practiced casualness. "Interesting that it's from the executive coffee machine," Cassandra observed, her tone light but pointed. "Those are usually reserved for client meetings and C-suite personnel." Olivia's stomach tightened. "Maybe someone made extra." "Maybe," Cassandra agreed, but her smile suggested she wasn't buying it. "So how did your project meeting go yesterday? I saw you and Mr. Carter working late in conference room C." The question felt loaded with implications that Olivia wasn't sure how to navigate. "Fine. We were reviewing the Morrison account presentation. It's a big client, so we wanted to make sure everything was perfect." "Of course," Cassandra nodded sagely, "though I have to say it's unusual for Mr. Carter to personally oversee administrative-level work. He's usually more hands-off with new employees." Before Olivia could respond, David Kim appeared at her desk, carrying a stack of folders and wearing his usual friendly smile. "Morning, Olivia. How's the Morrison presentation coming along? Ethan mentioned you had some excellent insights yesterday." "Ethan?" Cassandra's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. "Since when does Mr. Carter go by his first name with administrative staff?" David looked confused by the question. "Oh, he's always been pretty casual about that stuff. Very approachable guy." He turned back to Olivia. "Anyway, could you help me pull together some comparison data? I want to make sure we're presenting the strongest possible numbers." "Absolutely," Olivia said, grateful for the distraction. "I'll have it ready by lunch." As David walked away, Cassandra remained perched on the desk edge, her expression thoughtful. "You know, in my 5 years here, I've never seen Mr. Carter take such a personal interest in onboarding a new hire. I'm sure he just wants to make sure the Morrison presentation goes well," Olivia said carefully. "I'm sure," Cassandra agreed, but there was something in her tone that made Olivia's skin prickle with unease. The morning passed in a blur of spreadsheets and phone calls, but Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, evaluated, discussed in whispered conversations she couldn't quite hear. Every time someone walked past her desk, she wondered if they were speculating about the coffee cup, about her late meeting with Ethan, about the way he'd said her name just a little too softly yesterday. Around noon, her computer chimed with a new email from Ethan's assistant, Priscilla. "Ms. Bennett, Mr. Carter would like to schedule lunch to discuss the Morrison presentation refinements. 1 p.m. at Meridian Bistro on 47th Street. Please confirm. Best regards, Priscilla Chen." Olivia stared at the message, her heart racing. Lunch at a restaurant, just the two of them. It felt like crossing a line she wasn't sure she was ready to cross, but refusing would raise even more questions. She was typing her confirmation when Cassandra materialized beside her desk again, this time with 2 other administrative assistants in tow, Jessica and Monica, both of whom were looking at Olivia with barely concealed interest. "Lunch plans?" Cassandra asked, clearly having seen the email over Olivia's shoulder. "Work meeting," Olivia replied quickly, hitting send before she could change her mind. "At Meridian Bistro?" Jessica piped up. "That's where they take the big clients. Must be some important project." "It is," Olivia said firmly, standing and gathering her purse. "The Morrison account could be huge for the company." "Of course," Monica agreed, but she exchanged a look with Cassandra that made Olivia's cheeks burn. Meridian Bistro was elegant without being ostentatious, the kind of place where business lunches happened over artisanal salads and carefully crafted cocktails. Olivia arrived exactly on time to find Ethan already seated at a corner table, looking relaxed in a way that seemed impossible given his position and responsibilities. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached, standing to pull out her chair. "We're in public," she murmured, accepting the gesture but glancing around nervously. "We're colleagues having a business lunch," he replied smoothly, but his eyes told a different story. "How's your first week going, really?" She waited until they'd ordered Caesar salad for her, salmon for him, before answering honestly. "It's wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. I love the work. I love feeling challenged and useful again, but people are watching us, Ethan. Cassandra Wells practically interrogated me about the coffee you sent this morning." His expression grew serious. "I should have been more careful about that. I'm sorry. It's not just the coffee. It's the way you look at me during meetings, the way you say my name, the fact that you personally requested me for projects that someone at my level wouldn't normally handle." And she pushed lettuce around her plate, anxiety killing her appetite. "I can't afford to have people think I'm sleeping my way up the corporate ladder." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're exceeding expectations at every turn. But you're right. I need to be more careful about maintaining professional boundaries during office hours and after office hours." The question hung between them like a challenge. Ethan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment before pulling back. "After office hours, I'd like to take you to dinner, somewhere far from the office, where we can talk without worrying about who might be watching." Olivia felt her resolve wavering. "This is dangerous. So is living your whole life playing it safe," he replied. "I haven't felt this way about anyone in years, Olivia. I know the situation is complicated, but I also know that what's happening between us is worth exploring." Their food arrived, providing a welcome distraction from the intensity of the conversation. They talked about safer topics, the Morrison presentation, industry trends, her impressions of the company culture. But underneath the professional discussion, Olivia could feel the current of attraction pulling them toward deeper waters. "I should get back," she said finally, checking her watch. "People will notice if I'm gone too long." "Of course." Ethan signaled for the check. "Thank you for lunch. The presentation revisions we discussed will make all the difference." They had discussed revisions, along with everything else. It was a perfect cover story for anyone who might ask. Walking back to the office together felt both natural and fraught with risk. They maintained careful distance, discussed quarterly projections and client deliverables, but Olivia was acutely aware of every step, every breath, every moment of shared space. As they approached the TechNova building, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "Everything okay?" Olivia asked. "Fine," he said, but she caught the tight line of his jaw. "Just office politics." They rode the elevator up in professional silence, but as the doors opened to the 32nd floor, Olivia realized that whatever text Ethan had received, their carefully balanced dance was about to get significantly more complicated. Cassandra was waiting by Olivia's desk, her expression predatory and excited in a way that made Olivia's blood run cold. "How was lunch?" she asked sweetly. "I hope the Morrison presentation discussion was productive." The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m., lighting up Olivia's phone screen in the darkness of her Brooklyn apartment. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., Bryant Park. Come alone." She stared at the message, her stomach twisting with dread. The tone was wrong, urgent, almost desperate. This wasn't the warm, careful communication they'd established over the past week. Something had gone terribly wrong. Sleep was impossible. Olivia spent the night pacing her tiny apartment, running through every interaction from the day before, every glance, every word that might have been overheard or misinterpreted. By dawn, she felt hollow and exhausted, but she was dressed and on the subway to Manhattan by 6:30. Bryant Park at sunrise was nearly empty, just a few joggers and early commuters cutting through on their way to coffee shops and subway stations. Olivia found Ethan sitting on a bench near the library, still wearing yesterday's shirt, his hair disheveled in a way that suggested he hadn't slept either. "You look terrible," she said, settling beside him but maintaining careful distance. "I feel worse." He handed her a coffee cup from the cart nearby, but his usual thoughtfulness felt mechanical, distracted. "We have a problem. Cassandra. Bigger than Cassandra." Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolling to a text message thread. My ex-wife's lawyer contacted me yesterday afternoon. Apparently someone sent them photos of us at lunch, along with some very detailed speculation about our relationship. Olivia's blood turned to ice. Photos? Nothing inappropriate. Just us talking, sharing what looks like an intimate conversation over lunch. He showed her the images on his phone, shots taken through the restaurant window, capturing moments when they'd leaned closer together, when his hand had briefly touched hers. Oh God, she whispered, who would do this? Someone who wants to cause maximum damage, Ethan said grimly. Rebecca, my ex, she's been looking for any excuse to revisit our divorce settlement, claiming I'm involved with an employee, especially one who reports to me directly, gives her grounds to question my character and potentially my business practices. Olivia felt sick. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I told you people were watching us. I know. You were right, and I was careless. He turned to face her fully, his expression pained. But there's more. The photos were sent anonymously, but they came with detailed information about your employment history, your salary, even your student loan debt. Someone did their homework. Cassandra? Olivia said immediately. She's been fishing for information all week, asking questions, watching everything we do. Maybe, or maybe someone higher up who sees our relationship as a threat to their own position. Ethan rubbed his temples, looking older than his 35 years. The point is, this isn't going away quietly. A jogger passed by their bench, earbuds in, oblivious to the career-ending conversation happening just feet away. Olivia watched him disappear around the corner and envied his simple morning routine. What do we do? She asked quietly. We have options, Ethan said, but his tone suggested none of them were good. I can transfer you to a different department, remove myself from any projects you're working on, create enough professional distance that no one can claim favoritism. That would basically confirm everything they're suspicious about. Yes, or... He hesitated, and Olivia knew she wasn't going to like the alternative. Or you resign. We say you received a better offer elsewhere, that your departure is completely unrelated to any personal matters. You leave with excellent references, and I help you find a position at another company where this won't be an issue. The suggestion hit her like a physical blow. You want me to quit? I want to protect you, Ethan said urgently. If this escalates, if Rebecca's lawyers start digging deeper, they'll paint you as someone who slept her way into a job, who manipulated a grieving CEO into making poor business decisions. Your reputation in this industry could be destroyed. And yours? I'm already established. I have resources, connections, legal protection. You don't. The truth of it was brutal and undeniable. I won't let you get hurt because of my mistakes. Olivia stood up abruptly, pacing away from the bench before turning back to face him. So that's it. Someone takes a few photos and sends some gossip to your ex-wife, and I have to give up the best job I've ever had. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Her voice rose, drawing glances from a passing dog walker. She forced herself to speak more quietly. I finally found something good, something that makes me feel like I have a future, and now I'm supposed to walk away because we couldn't keep our hands to ourselves. Ethan stood too, closing the distance between them. Olivia, please understand. I've been through a public scandal before. I know how ugly this can get, how quickly careers can be destroyed. I won't let that happen to you. Maybe that should have been my choice to make, she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Maybe you should have thought about the consequences before pursuing me in the first place. You're right, he admitted. I was selfish. I wanted you so badly that I convinced myself we could make it work without considering the real-world implications. They stood in the early morning light, the weight of impossible choices hanging between them. Around them, the city was waking up, people heading to jobs they took for granted, relationships that didn't require secret meetings in public parks. What if we tried the first option? Olivia asked finally. Professional distance, different departments, completely above board. Rebecca's lawyers would still use it against me, and Cassandra or whoever sent these photos would just dig deeper, looking for more evidence. Ethan's voice was heavy with resignation. "The only way this stops is if there's nothing left to find. Because I'm gone. Because we end this before it destroys both of us." The words hung in the morning air like a death sentence. Olivia felt something breaking apart inside her chest, not just her heart but her hope, her faith that good things could happen to people like her. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course, but Olivia—" He reached for her hand, then stopped himself, the gesture incomplete and painful. "Whatever you decide, I want you to know that meeting you, getting to know you, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in years. I'm sorry that my baggage is destroying it." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They parted ways at the park entrance, him heading north toward the office, her turning south toward the subway that would take her back to Brooklyn and the small apartment where she could fall apart in private. On the train ride home, Olivia stared at her reflection in the dark window and tried to figure out how to explain to her landlord that she might not be able to make next month's rent after all. Some dreams, she realized, came with a price tag that was always higher than you thought you could afford. By the time she reached her station, she'd made her decision. But first, she was going to find out exactly who had taken those photos and why. If her career was going to be destroyed, she wanted to look her destroyer in the eye. Olivia arrived at the office 45 minutes early, her laptop bag heavy with determination and a plan she wasn't entirely sure would work. The 32nd floor was empty, except for the overnight cleaning crew finishing their rounds. Perfect. She needed access to things that would be impossible to investigate once the office filled with people who might be watching, waiting, reporting back to whoever had orchestrated yesterday's devastating revelation. Her fingers flew across her keyboard as she logged into the building's visitor management system, a perk of her administrative access that she'd never expected to use for detective work. If someone had been following them to lunch, taking photos through restaurant windows, they had to have been close enough to the TechNova building to know their movements. The system showed everyone who had entered or exited the building over the past week. Olivia scrolled through the digital records, cross-referencing timestamps with her memory of when she and Ethan had left for lunch. There, 12:47 p.m., just 3 minutes after they'd stepped into the elevator together. Visitor, Diana Blackstone. Meridian Media Consulting host, Cassandra Wells. Purpose, vendor meeting. Duration, 3 hours, 17 minutes. Olivia stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. Meridian Media, the same name as the restaurant where they'd had lunch. That couldn't be a coincidence. She quickly Googled Diana Blackstone and found a LinkedIn profile that made her stomach drop. Private investigator and corporate security consultant. Son of a bitch, she whispered to her empty desk. Language, Ms. Bennett. Olivia spun around to find Cassandra standing behind her, 2 coffee cups in hand and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 7:30 a.m., Cassandra looked perfectly put together, hair-styled, makeup flawless, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly grocery budget. "You're here early," Olivia said, quickly minimizing the visitor log screen. "So are you," Cassandra replied, setting one of the coffee cups on Olivia's desk. "Couldn't sleep either." The question felt loaded with meaning. Olivia accepted the coffee but didn't drink it, studying Cassandra's face for any sign of guilt or satisfaction. "Just wanted to get a head start on the Morrison presentation. Big day tomorrow." "Of course." Cassandra perched on the edge of Olivia's desk, the same position she'd taken during every fishing expedition over the past week. "Though I heard there might be some personnel changes affecting that project." Olivia's blood chilled. "What kind of personnel changes?" "Oh, just rumors," Cassandra said with studied casualness. "You know how people talk. Someone mentioned that Mr. Carter might be reassigning some administrative responsibilities. Restructuring, they called it." The coffee in Olivia's hands suddenly felt like lead. "Where did you hear that?" "Around." Cassandra's smile turned predatory. "The walls have ears in a place like this, sweetie. Especially when people think they're being discreet about their extracurricular activities." There it was. The mask was finally slipping. I'm not sure what you're implying, Olivia said carefully. I'm not implying anything, Cassandra replied. I'm stating facts. You and Mr. Carter have been having an inappropriate relationship that violates company policy. Someone had to document it before it became a bigger problem. Someone like Diana Blackstone. Cassandra's composure flickered for just a moment, surprise, then calculation, then that cold smile returning. I see you've been doing your homework. Very thorough of you. Why? Olivia stood up, setting the coffee cup down hard enough to splash liquid onto her desk. Why would you do this? I never did anything to you. You didn't have to, Cassandra said, her voice turning sharp. You walked in here with your big eyes and your sad story about needing this job, and within a week you were getting personal attention from the CEO, special projects, lunch meetings. Do you have any idea how long I've been working here? How many years I've put in, waiting for someone to notice my contributions? The jealousy in her voice was raw, bitter. Olivia felt a flash of understanding mixed with anger. So you hired a private investigator to spy on us? I hired someone to document what was already happening, Cassandra corrected. And lucky for everyone, she was very thorough. Photos, timestamps, even some interesting audio from your little conference room meetings. Olivia's heart stopped. Audio? Walls are thin in those glass boxes, Cassandra said conversationally. Amazing what you can pick up with the right equipment. Very romantic, really. All that talk about taking risks, about feeling alive again. The elevator dinged, and both women turned to see Ethan step onto the floor. He was early too, but not early enough. His eyes immediately found Olivia's across the office space, and she saw him register the tension, the way Cassandra was practically vibrating with vindictive satisfaction. Good morning, ladies, he said, his voice carefully neutral as he approached them. Mr. Carter. Cassandra stood up, smoothing her skirt. Perfect timing. Olivia and I were just discussing some interesting developments regarding company policy compliance. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What kind of developments? The kind that might interest your ex-wife's legal team, Cassandra said sweetly, and possibly HR, and maybe even the board of directors, depending on how comprehensive the documentation turns out to be. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Olivia watched Ethan's face, saw the moment he realized exactly how trapped they were. What do you want? He asked quietly. Nothing dramatic, Cassandra replied. Just some personnel adjustments. Perhaps Ms. Bennett would be happier in a different department, or better yet, a different company. I hear the market for administrative assistants is quite competitive these days. And if she transfers? Ethan's voice was controlled, but Olivia could see the fury burning behind his eyes. Then I'm sure the documentation would become less relevant. Mistakes happen, files get corrupted, witnesses forget details. Cassandra shrugged. It's amazing how flexible memory can be when people find new opportunities elsewhere. Olivia felt something break apart inside her chest. Not just anger, but a cold, clear understanding of exactly how powerless she was in this situation. Cassandra held all the cards, the photos, the audio, the connections to make Olivia's professional life a nightmare. You have until Friday, Cassandra continued. 1 week to find Ms. Bennett a new position somewhere far from TechNova. I think that's generous, don't you? She gathered her coffee cup and walked toward her desk with the satisfied stride of someone who'd just won a game everyone else didn't know they were playing. Olivia and Ethan stood in the growing morning light, surrounded by the elegant trappings of a successful company, both knowing that everything they'd worked for was crumbling around them. I'm sorry, Ethan said quietly. So am I, Olivia replied. But as she watched Cassandra settling into her workstation with smug satisfaction, she realized that sorry wasn't going to be enough. Some battles couldn't be won by playing by the rules, especially when the other side had already thrown the rulebook out the window. She had until Friday to figure out how to fight back, and she was done being the victim in someone else's power game. The anxiety medication went down with lukewarm coffee and a prayer that her hands would stop shaking long enough to execute the plan she'd spent all night perfecting. Olivia sat in her car outside a small internet cafe in Queens, 40 minutes from Manhattan and a world away from the gleaming corporate towers where her professional life was being systematically destroyed. Her laptop was open on the passenger seat, connected to a mobile hotspot, completely untraceable to TechNova's network. She'd spent Tuesday night researching everything she could find about Cassandra Wells, and what she'd discovered was more interesting than she'd expected. 5 years at TechNova, yes, but before that, a gap in her employment history that raised questions. And before that gap, a very different kind of job at a financial services firm that had been shut down by the SEC for embezzlement. Coincidence? Olivia doubted it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Please don't do anything reckless. Let me handle this." She typed back, "Some things require a woman's touch." The internet cafe was perfect for what she needed. Anonymous, cash only, and full of people who minded their own business. Olivia settled into a corner booth and opened her real work for the day, finding Diana Blackstone. A private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage wouldn't be easy to locate, but everyone made mistakes. Social media posts, professional networking, credit card receipts. There was always a trail if you knew where to look. It took 3 hours, but Olivia finally found it. A LinkedIn check-in at a Starbucks near Central Park, posted the same day Diana had signed into TechNova as Cassandra's vendor meeting. The location data was still embedded in the metadata. 30 minutes later, Olivia was sitting in that same Starbucks, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, watching the door. If Diana Blackstone was the kind of professional who stalked people for a living, she probably had routines, patterns, favorite spots for conducting business. At 2:47 p.m., her patience paid off. Diana Blackstone was younger than Olivia had expected, maybe 35, with sharp features and the kind of confident stride that came from carrying secrets for a living. She ordered a Venti Pike Place roast and settled into a table near the window, pulling out a tablet and what looked like a very expensive camera with a telephoto lens. Olivia waited until Diana was absorbed in whatever surveillance photos she was reviewing, then approached her table with her own coffee and her most disarming smile. "Excuse me, are you Diana Blackstone?" Diana looked up sharply, her hand instinctively moving to close the tablet. "Who's asking?" "Someone who thinks we might have a mutual interest in Cassandra Wells." Olivia sat down without waiting for invitation. "And someone who has information you might find professionally valuable." "I don't know what you're talking about," Diana said, but she didn't get up to leave. "The photos you took of me and Ethan Carter at Meridian Bistro were very professional," Olivia continued conversationally. "Good angles, perfect lighting. You're clearly talented at your job." Diana studied her with the calculating gaze of someone who made a living reading people. "You're Olivia Bennett, and you're the private investigator Cassandra hired to document my relationship with my boss." Olivia leaned forward slightly. "The question is, do you know why she really wanted those photos?" "I assume to protect the company from potential liability issues." "Did you know that Cassandra was fired from her last job for embezzling client funds?" Olivia pulled out her own tablet, showing the research she'd compiled. "Or that she's been systematically undermining other female employees at TechNova for years? There's a pattern here, Diana, and you just helped her add another victim to her list." Diana's expression shifted, professional interest warring with something that might have been conscience. "Show me what you have." For the next 20 minutes, Olivia laid out everything she'd discovered about Cassandra's history, her methods, her motivations. Diana listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification or requesting to see additional documentation. "This is comprehensive," Diana said finally. "If it's accurate, it suggests my client misrepresented the nature of her request." "More than misrepresented," Olivia said. "She's using your work to blackmail her way into a promotion she doesn't deserve, while destroying the career of someone who never did anything to her except get noticed by the wrong person." Diana was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the afternoon foot traffic. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to hire you," Olivia said. "Same rate Cassandra's paying, plus a bonus if you can find evidence of her current financial irregularities. Because I guarantee you, someone with her history doesn't suddenly develop integrity. You want me to investigate my own client? I want you to do what you do best. Find the truth." Olivia pulled out an envelope containing every dollar she had in her savings account. "This is a retainer. There's more when you deliver results." Diana looked at the money, then at Olivia's face, searching for something. "This could destroy your career if it backfires." "My career is already being destroyed," Olivia replied. "At least this way, I'm fighting back instead of just accepting it." Diana picked up the envelope, weighing it in her hands like she was weighing Olivia's chances of success. "I'll need 48 hours. I have until Friday, before Cassandra's ultimatum expires. Then we'd better hope 48 hours is enough." They exchanged contact information, and Diana packed up her surveillance equipment with practiced efficiency. As she prepared to leave, she turned back to Olivia with something that might have been respect in her eyes. "For what it's worth, I've been doing this for 10 years, and most people in your situation just fold. It takes guts to fight back against someone who holds all the cards." "I'm learning that sometimes the cards aren't as fixed as they appear," Olivia replied. After Diana left, Olivia sat in the Starbucks for another hour, nursing her coffee and trying to process what she'd just done. She'd hired a private investigator with money she couldn't afford to spend, based on a plan that could blow up in her face spectacularly. But for the first time since this nightmare started, she felt like she had some control over her own fate. Her phone buzzed with another text from Ethan. "Dinner tonight? We need to talk about next steps." She typed back, "Rain check. I'm working on something that might change everything." On the subway ride back to Manhattan, Olivia stared at her reflection in the dark window and realized she was smiling for the first time in days. Cassandra Wells had underestimated her, had assumed that someone desperate enough to take a job at TechNova would be too scared to fight back when threatened. But Cassandra had never been a scholarship kid from Brooklyn who'd learned to survive on wit and determination when money ran out. She'd never had to choose between groceries and textbooks, never had to smile politely while professors suggested she wasn't cut out for the competitive business world. Some fights were worth having, even when you couldn't afford to lose, especially when you couldn't afford to lose. Diana's phone call came at 6:23 a.m. on Thursday morning, 41 hours and 17 minutes after Olivia had hired her. "We need to meet." Diana's voice was sharp with urgency. "And you're going to want to see this before you go into the office today." 20 minutes later, Olivia was back at the Starbucks in Central Park, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that couldn't warm the chill running through her veins. Diana slid into the seat across from her, carrying a manila folder that looked thick enough to change everything. "Your instincts were right," Diana said without preamble. "Cassandra Wells has been running a very sophisticated embezzlement scheme at TechNova for the past 18 months. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. "How sophisticated?" "She's been creating fake vendor accounts, approving payments for services that were never rendered, then funneling the money through a series of shell companies." Diana opened the folder, revealing bank statements, forged invoices, and email threads that painted a picture of systematic fraud. Conservative estimate, she's stolen over $200,000. "Jesus," Olivia breathed, scanning the documents. How did she hide it for so long? By being very good at her job and very careful about covering her tracks. Also by making sure she was the person responsible for reviewing administrative expenses in her department. Diana pulled out a laptop and opened a spreadsheet. But she made one crucial mistake. She got greedy when she saw an opportunity to get rid of you. "What do you mean?" "The private investigation she hired me for? She paid my fee using company funds, disguised as a security consultation. Except she forgot that I keep detailed records of all client interactions, including recorded phone calls, where she explicitly states her intention to fabricate evidence against you and Mr. Carter." Diana pressed play on an audio file, and Cassandra's voice filled the small space between them. "I need photos that suggest they're having an inappropriate relationship. I don't care if you have to create the impression of intimacy that isn't really there. This woman is a threat to my position, and I want her gone." The recording continued, with Cassandra detailing her plans to use the photos as leverage, her intention to present them to Ethan's ex-wife as ammunition for a legal battle, and her ultimate goal of positioning herself for a promotion once Olivia was removed from the picture. "She's been planning this since your first week," Diana said quietly. "You weren't paranoid. You were right to be worried." Olivia felt a mixture of vindication and rage burning in her chest. "What about the audio she claims to have from our conference room meetings?" "Fabricated. I checked the building's technical specifications. Those glass conference rooms are actually soundproofed specifically to prevent corporate espionage. There's no way to record audio from outside the room without sophisticated equipment that would have been noticed by building security." Diana handed her a USB drive along with copies of all the documentation. "Everything you need is here. Bank records, forged invoices, recorded conversations, even email evidence of her coordination with your boyfriend's ex-wife. She contacted Rebecca directly? Apparently, your company's former CEO has been looking for ways to discredit Mr. Carter for months. Cassandra reached out to her, offered to provide compromising information in exchange for a recommendation for a position at Rebecca's new company." Diana's expression was grim. This was never about protecting TechNova. It was about destroying both of you for her own advancement. Olivia stared at the USB drive in her hands, feeling its weight like a loaded gun. This is enough to have her arrested. More than enough. The question is, what do you want to do with it? For a moment, Olivia allowed herself to imagine Cassandra in handcuffs, her smug smile wiped away by the reality of criminal charges. But as satisfying as that image was, she realized there was a better way to handle this. "I want to give her a chance to confess," Olivia said finally, "in front of witnesses." Diana raised an eyebrow. "That's surprisingly merciful." "It's strategic," Olivia corrected. "If she confesses voluntarily, admits to the embezzlement and the attempted blackmail, TechNova can handle it internally without the publicity of a criminal trial. But if she refuses, then you turn everything over to the FBI and let them sort it out." Diana nodded approvingly. "Smart. Clean resolution if she cooperates, total destruction if she doesn't." "Exactly." They spent the next hour planning the confrontation. Diana would be nearby with recording equipment, documenting everything for legal protection. Olivia would approach Cassandra privately first, offering her the chance to come clean. If that failed, they'd escalate to involving HR and potentially law enforcement. "Are you sure you want to handle the initial confrontation alone?" Diana asked as they prepared to leave. "This woman has already proven she's dangerous when cornered." "I need to face her myself," Olivia said. "She's tried to destroy my career, my reputation, my future. I won't hide behind someone else when I finally get the chance to fight back." At 8:47 a.m., Olivia walked into the TechNova building carrying the USB drive and a confidence she hadn't felt in weeks. The security guard smiled and waved her through, oblivious to the fact that she was about to expose one of the company's longest-serving employees as a criminal. Cassandra was at her desk, perfectly put together as always, reviewing what looked like expense reports with the casual air of someone who had no idea her entire world was about to collapse. "Good morning, Cassandra," Olivia said, approaching her workstation. "Do you have a few minutes to talk? Privately?" "Of course, sweetie," Cassandra replied with that familiar condescending smile. "Let me guess. You've decided to take my advice about finding opportunities elsewhere?" "Something like that." Olivia gestured toward the empty conference room where this nightmare had begun. "Shall we?" As they walked toward conference room C, Olivia caught sight of Ethan in his office, looking up as they passed. Their eyes met through the glass walls, and she gave him the slightest nod, a signal that everything was about to change. Cassandra settled into her chair with the satisfaction of someone who believed she held all the power. So, have you found a new position? I'd be happy to provide a reference, of course. Professional courtesy and all that. Actually, Olivia said, placing the USB drive on the table between them, I wanted to talk to you about Meridian Media Consulting, shell company accounts, and approximately $200,000 in missing funds. The color drained from Cassandra's face so quickly that Olivia almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I don't know what you think you've found, Cassandra began, but her voice had lost its confident edge. I know exactly what I've found, Olivia replied calmly. The question is, do you want to confess to HR and cooperate with returning the stolen funds, or would you prefer to explain everything to the FBI? The silence that followed was so complete that Olivia could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system, the distant sound of traffic 32 floors below, and the thundering of her own heartbeat as she waited to see how this story would end. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope, and Olivia watched Cassandra's carefully constructed facade crumble in real time. You don't understand, Cassandra said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. You have no idea what it's like to work somewhere for 5 years and watch everyone else get promoted while you're stuck in the same position, making the same salary, being treated like furniture. So you decided to steal $200,000 and destroy my career. Olivia's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking with adrenaline. That was your solution. I never meant for it to go this far. Cassandra's composure was disintegrating completely now, tears beginning to form in her eyes. The money, it started as just borrowing. I was going to pay it back when my mother's medical bills were finally covered. But then there were more bills and more, and then I showed up and threatened your little empire. You walked in here and within a week you had everything I'd been working toward for years. Cassandra's voice rose, the desperation finally breaking through. Personal meetings with the CEO, special projects, respect. Do you know how many times I've tried to get Ethan to notice my contributions? How many proposals I've submitted that got ignored? Olivia felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but it was quickly overwhelmed by anger. So you hired a private investigator to fabricate evidence against me? The evidence wasn't fabricated, Cassandra said desperately. You were having an inappropriate relationship with your boss. I just documented it. By paying Diana Blackstone with company funds to take photos and create false audio recordings. Olivia slid her phone across the table, Diana's recorded conversations ready to play. Should I let HR hear exactly how you described your plan to create the impression of intimacy that isn't really there? Cassandra stared at the phone like it was a loaded weapon. How did you... Diana has been very cooperative once she realized what kind of person she was really working for. Olivia leaned forward. She's outside right now, documenting this conversation. So I'll ask you again, do you want to confess to HR and work out some kind of restitution agreement? Or should I call the FBI and let them handle the embezzlement charges? The conference room door opened, and both women turned to see Jennifer Walsh from HR entering, followed by Ethan, and a man Olivia didn't recognize wearing a suit that screamed, corporate lawyer. Ms. Wells, Jennifer said, her voice professionally neutral but her expression grim. We need to discuss some irregularities that have come to our attention regarding your departmental expense accounts. Cassandra looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Jennifer's professional disappointment, Ethan's barely controlled anger, the lawyer's calculating assessment, and Olivia's quiet determination. The weight of her choices finally seemed to settle on her shoulders. I can explain, she said weakly. I hope so, the lawyer replied, setting a tablet on the table and opening it to reveal bank statements and financial records. Because we have documentation of systematic fund diversion totaling $247,000 over the past 18 months, along with evidence of attempted blackmail against 2 employees. Cassandra's face went white. Blackmail? I was trying to protect the company from a potential scandal by coordinating with Mr. Carter's ex-wife to provide fabricated evidence for use in a divorce proceeding. Jennifer's voice was ice cold. By hiring a private investigator using company funds to stalk and photograph employees, by threatening to destroy Ms. Bennett's career unless she resigned. Each accusation hit Cassandra like a physical blow. Olivia watched her sink deeper into her chair, the reality of her situation finally breaking through the delusions she'd constructed to justify her actions. Cassandra started, then stopped. She looked at Olivia, and for a moment her expression shifted from desperation to something that might have been genuine remorse. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you personally. I felt invisible, insignificant, and when you showed up and everything seemed so easy for you." "Nothing about this has been easy," Olivia said quietly. "I've been terrified for weeks, thinking I was going to lose the best opportunity I've ever had because someone decided I didn't deserve it." "You're right," Cassandra whispered. "You didn't deserve any of this. I was angry and desperate, and I made terrible choices." She looked up at Jennifer. "I'll confess to everything. I'll cooperate completely. I'll pay back every penny, even if it takes me the rest of my life." The lawyer made notes on his tablet while Jennifer nodded grimly. "Ms. Wells, you'll need to sign a formal confession and agree to immediate termination without severance. We'll also need you to surrender all company property and provide access to any accounts or records related to the fraudulent activities. And the blackmail allegations." Ethan spoke for the first time, his voice carefully controlled. I'll provide all the audio and video files to prove that they were either fabricated or taken out of context," Cassandra said, not meeting his eyes. "And I'll contact Rebecca's lawyers to retract any statements I made regarding your relationship with Ms. Bennett." Jennifer and the lawyer exchanged glances. "Ms. Wells, you have two options. You can cooperate fully with our internal investigation and accept immediate termination, or we can turn this matter over to law enforcement and let the criminal justice system handle it." "I'll cooperate," Cassandra said immediately. "Please, I know I don't deserve any consideration, but I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The next hour passed in a blur of signed documents, surrendered company property, and detailed confessions. Cassandra provided passwords to hidden accounts, recordings of her conversations with Diana and Rebecca's legal team, and a complete timeline of her embezzlement activities. When it was finally over, security escorted Cassandra from the building with a box containing her personal belongings and an escort that ensured she couldn't access any company systems or speak to other employees. Olivia found herself alone in the conference room with Ethan, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and highlighting the exhaustion in both their faces. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I think so," she said, though her hands were still shaking slightly. "It's over, right? Really over?" "Really over," he confirmed. "Jennifer said the company will issue a statement clearing both of us of any wrongdoing. The Morrison presentation is still scheduled for tomorrow, and—" he hesitated, "and we need to talk about what happens next, between us." Olivia looked at him. This man who had inadvertently turned her life upside down, who had given her the best job she'd ever had, and the most complicated relationship she'd ever experienced. The crisis was over, but the fundamental question remained: could they build something real together without the shadow of corporate politics and workplace scandal? "Tomorrow," she said finally. "Let's get through the Morrison presentation first. Then we can figure out what we want our story to be." Ethan smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. "I'd like that very much." As they gathered their things and prepared to return to their normal workday, if anything about their situation could ever be called normal again, Olivia realized that surviving Cassandra's attack had taught her something important about herself. She was stronger than she'd known, smarter than she'd given herself credit for, and brave enough to fight for the things that mattered to her. Some battles were worth having, even when the outcome was uncertain. Especially when the outcome was uncertain. Outside the conference room windows, Manhattan glittered in the afternoon light, full of promise and possibility. And for the first time in weeks, Olivia felt like she belonged in this glittering world after all. 6 months later, The morning light filtering through the windows of Olivia's new one-bedroom apartment in Park Slope felt different than it had 6 months ago. Warmer, softer, full of possibility instead of anxiety. She stood at her kitchen counter, preparing coffee with the expensive machine Ethan had bought her for her birthday last month, watching the steam rise like tiny prayers of gratitude. The apartment wasn't large, but it was hers, really hers, paid for with the promotion and salary increase she'd earned after the Morrison presentation had secured TechNova its biggest client contract in company history. Her phone buzzed with a text from her therapist confirming their appointment for next week. The anxiety medication still sat in her medicine cabinet, but she'd been taking it less frequently as the months passed, and her confidence in her own strength had grown. Some wounds healed slowly, but they did heal. On the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like the Brooklyn Bridge, was a newspaper clipping from the business section of the New York Times. TechNova Solutions names Olivia Bennett as Director of Client Relations. The photo showed her shaking hands with the Morrison account team, professional and confident in a navy blazer that she'd bought with her own money from her own success. Cassandra Wells had disappeared from their lives as completely as if she'd never existed. The last Olivia had heard, she was working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm in New Jersey, slowly paying back the money she'd stolen through a court-ordered restitution plan. There had been no criminal charges in the end. TechNova had chosen to handle the matter internally to avoid negative publicity, and Cassandra's complete cooperation had earned her a second chance at rebuilding her life. Sometimes, late at night, Olivia found herself wondering if Cassandra had found the peace that had eluded her for so long. She hoped so. Carrying that much anger and desperation was exhausting, and everyone deserved the chance to start over. The sound of a key in the lock made her smile. Ethan had his own apartment 15 minutes away, but he'd been staying over more frequently as their relationship had evolved from stolen moments to something deeper, more substantial. They'd taken it slowly, carefully, building trust alongside passion, making sure that what they had could survive in the daylight of normal life. "Good morning," he said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with his hair slightly disheveled and carrying 2 bags from her favorite bakery. "I brought breakfast." "You brought carbohydrates," she corrected, but she was smiling as she accepted the bag. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to spoil my girlfriend?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind and pressing a kiss to her temple. The word girlfriend still sent a little thrill through her. After months of secret glances and careful professional distance, being able to claim their relationship openly felt like a luxury she'd never take for granted. "Speaking of which," Ethan continued, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I have something for you." Olivia's heart skipped, but instead of a ring box, he pulled out an envelope with the TechNova logo. "What's this?" "Open it and see." Inside was a letter on official company letterhead, signed by the board of directors. Olivia read it twice before the words fully registered. "They want to send me to the London office," she said, looking up at him with wide eyes, "to head up international client relations. For 2 years, with a substantial salary increase and a guaranteed promotion to vice president when you return." Ethan's expression was carefully neutral. "It's an incredible opportunity, Olivia. The kind of career-making position that could set you up for anything you want to do next." She stared at the letter, her mind racing. London, international experience, a title that would open doors she'd never dreamed of walking through. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd fought for, handed to her in a single opportunity. "There's just one problem," she said slowly. "What's that?" "It's 3,000 miles away from you." Ethan smiled, the careful neutrality dissolving into something warmer. "Actually, there might be a solution to that problem too." He pulled out a second envelope, this one addressed to him. "The London office has been looking for a new regional director, someone with experience in American markets who could help bridge the gap between our US and European operations." Olivia felt her breath catch. "You'd move to London? With me? I'd move anywhere with you," he said simply. But London seems like a good place to start. New city, new challenges, new adventures. What do you think? She looked around her apartment, the space she'd worked so hard to afford, the life she'd built brick by brick from nothing. 6 months ago, the idea of leaving everything behind would have terrified her. But now, looking at the man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word, she realized that home wasn't a place anymore. Home was wherever they decided to build it together. "I think," she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him, "that some opportunities are worth taking risks for." Later that morning, as they sat at her small dining table sharing pastries and making lists of everything they'd need to do before moving to London, Olivia caught sight of herself in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who'd walked into that hotel bar 9 months ago, more confident, more self-assured, more aware of her own strength. She'd learned that love could be complicated and beautiful and worth fighting for. She'd learned that she was braver than she'd known, smarter than she'd given herself credit for, and capable of building the life she wanted, even when the odds were stacked against her. Most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes the best things in life came disguised as the most impossible situations. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, following her gaze to the mirror. "Just remembering that night at the hotel," she said softly. "How scared I was of taking a chance on something that seemed too good to be true. And now I know that the best things in life usually do seem too good to be true," she replied. "The trick is having the courage to believe in them anyway." Outside her window, Brooklyn was waking up. People heading to jobs they loved or tolerated, relationships that challenged them or sustained them, dreams that felt within reach or impossibly distant. Somewhere in the city, other women were facing impossible choices. Other hearts were taking chances on love that defied logic. Olivia sent a silent wish out into the morning air that they would all find the courage to fight for what they wanted, even when the path wasn't clear, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. Because sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, the universe conspired to give you exactly what you needed, wrapped in the package of what you thought you couldn't handle. 6 months ago, she'd been a woman counting pennies and hoping for a chance. Today, she was a woman planning a future with the person she loved, in a career that fulfilled her, in a life that she'd built with her own hands and her own choices. Some stories didn't have neat endings, but they had new beginnings, and sometimes that was even better. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between playing it safe and taking a risk that could change everything? Have you found the courage to fight for something that seemed impossible, even when the odds were against you? Love isn't always simple, and success isn't always easy, but sometimes the most complicated journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. What would you have done in Olivia's situation? Would you have taken the chance or played it safe? Your participation in this channel is very important to us. Please leave your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories might inspire someone else to take that leap of faith they've been afraid to make. Thank you for watching. Your feedback is very important to our work. Please leave a comment telling us what you think and where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. Your participation is very important for the continuation of our work, so share it with those who will love this story.